There is a strange paradox hidden inside fame. The more people know your name, the less they may know who you truly are. Imagine standing in front of 70,000 people. The lights are blinding. The music is shaking the ground beneath your feet. The crowd is screaming your name. To the world, it looks like the opposite of loneliness. It looks like connection. It looks like love. It looks like happiness. But what if loneliness isn't about how many people surround you? What if loneliness is about how many people truly understand you? That question sits at the heart of today's story. Because few people in modern history experienced fame on the scale of Michael Jackson. He wasn't simply a singer. He wasn't simply an entertainer. He became a global phenomenon. A symbol recognized in almost every corner of the world. Millions knew his face. Millions knew his voice. Millions felt connected to him. Yet behind the music, behind the headlines, behind the applause, there was another story. A story about pressure. A story about expectations. A story about the invisible cost of living inside a spotlight that never turns off. Most people dream of being famous. They imagine sold-out arenas, private jets, luxury homes, admiration from millions. What they rarely imagine is the loss of ordinary life. The inability to walk through a park unnoticed. The inability to visit a store without attracting attention. The inability to experience simple moments that most people take for granted. For many of us, privacy feels ordinary. For a global superstar, privacy can become a luxury more valuable than money. And perhaps that is where loneliness often begins. Not with isolation, but with separation. A separation from normal life. A separation from everyday experiences. A separation from the world most people live in. As the years passed, Michael Jackson's fame grew larger and larger. Every achievement seemed impossible to surpass. Every album raised expectations. Every performance became a global event. Success followed success. Records shattered. History was made. But success creates its own challenges. Because once the world begins to see you as extraordinary, it becomes difficult to simply be human. Human beings make mistakes. Human beings struggle. Human beings have fears. Human beings need understanding. But legends are often expected to be something else entirely. They are expected to be symbols, icons, myths. And the problem with becoming a myth is that people sometimes forget there is a person underneath. A person with emotions. A person with doubts. A person searching for the same things many of us search for. Acceptance, understanding, belonging. The irony is heartbreaking. Millions may admire you, yet you can still wonder if anyone truly knows you. Millions may cheer for you, yet you can still crave a genuine conversation. Millions may celebrate your success, yet you can still feel unseen. That is the hidden side of fame rarely discussed. The side that cameras do not capture. The side that magazine covers cannot show. The side that exists when the performance ends and the room becomes quiet. Because eventually every performer leaves the stage. The lights turn off. The crowd goes home. And all that remains is silence. Silence can be comforting, but it can also be revealing. It forces us to confront questions we spend our lives trying to avoid. Who are we without applause? Who are we without recognition? Who are we when nobody is watching? These are difficult questions for anyone. Perhaps even more difficult for someone whose life has been observed by the world for decades. Throughout history, many artists have transformed loneliness into creativity. Pain became music. Questions became art. Struggles became inspiration. And perhaps that is one reason great art resonates so deeply. Because behind every masterpiece is a human story. A story of hope. A story of fear. A story of longing. A story of connection. Michael Jackson's music connected people across continents, across languages, across cultures. People who shared nothing else could still sing the same songs. They could still recognize the same melodies. They could still feel the same emotions. That kind of influence is extraordinary. Yet influence and intimacy are not the same thing. Being recognized everywhere does not guarantee being understood. Being admired does not guarantee feeling known. Being loved by millions does not eliminate the universal human desire for authentic connection. Perhaps that is one of the reasons his story continues to fascinate people today. Not because it is a story about fame, but because it is a story about humanity. The more successful someone becomes, the more we assume their problems disappear. But success does not erase human emotions. It simply changes their shape. The fears become different, the challenges become different, the pressures become different, yet the need for belonging remains the same. And maybe that is why this story matters. Because it reminds us of something important. Every public figure is also a private human being. Every icon is also a person. Every legend carries struggles that the audience may never fully see. When we look at extraordinary lives, we often focus on achievements. The awards, the records, the accomplishments. But perhaps the most meaningful questions are different. What did they hope for? What did they fear? What gave them strength? What gave their lives meaning? Those questions reveal something deeper than fame ever could. They reveal humanity. And humanity is what connects all of us. Whether we perform for stadiums or live quiet lives. Whether our names are known around the world or only within our neighborhood. We all search for understanding. We all search for connection. We all search for a place where we can simply be ourselves. That search may be one of the most universal experiences of all. And perhaps that is the lasting lesson hidden inside this story. The lesson that fame cannot replace friendship. Success cannot replace understanding. Applause cannot replace connection. And no amount of recognition can remove the human need to feel truly known. In the end, what people remember most is not the size of a stage. Not the number of records sold. Not the headlines. Not the trophies. They remember how someone made them feel. The inspiration they provided. The hope they created. The memories they left behind. And decades later, millions of people continue to listen, dance, remember, and celebrate the legacy of Michael Jackson. Not because he was perfect. Not because he was larger than life. But because through music, performance, and creativity, he touched something deeply human. And perhaps that is the most powerful connection of all. A connection that survives time. A connection that survives distance. A connection that reminds us that behind every legend is a human story. And behind every human story is a desire shared by all of us, to be understood. There is something almost impossible to imagine about becoming the most famous person in the world. Most people spend their lives hoping to be noticed. Hoping their voice will be heard. Hoping somebody will remember their name. But what happens when everyone knows your name? What happens when every room you enter changes because of your presence? What happens when strangers feel like they know you, yet very few people actually do? Perhaps that is the hidden burden of extraordinary fame. The world sees access. The famous person experiences distance. The world sees admiration. The famous person often experiences isolation. And the larger the fame becomes, the wider that distance can grow. Imagine waking up every morning knowing that millions of people have expectations for you. Not just expectations about your work. Expectations about who you should be. How you should behave. How you should speak. How you should look. How you should live. Every decision becomes public. Every mistake becomes a headline. Every rumor becomes a conversation. And over time, something begins to happen. The line between the real person and the public image starts to blur. People stop seeing a human being. They start seeing a symbol, a legend, a character, an idea. Yet beneath all of those labels remains the same simple truth. A human heart still beats. A human mind still worries. A human soul still longs for connection. Perhaps that is why some of the most celebrated individuals in history have also spoken about loneliness. Because achievement and belonging are not the same thing. Recognition and understanding are not the same thing. Fame and friendship are not the same thing. One can fill stadiums, the other fills the heart. And no amount of applause can replace genuine human connection. As years pass, success often creates an invisible wall. Not because people stop caring, but because people begin seeing the famous person through a lens of myth rather than reality. Conversations change. Relationships change. Trust becomes more complicated. Every new interaction carries uncertainty. Does this person care about me? Or do they care about what I represent? Do they see the individual? Or the image? The celebrity? The success? The influence? These questions can quietly follow someone through life. Not every day, not every moment, but often enough to leave a mark. And perhaps one of the saddest realities about fame is that it can make ordinary experiences feel extraordinary. A walk through a neighborhood, a quiet dinner, a spontaneous conversation, a simple friendship. Things many people hardly notice become precious because they become rare. The ordinary becomes valuable, not because it is exciting, but because it feels real, because it feels human, because it feels free. And freedom is something many people don't associate with fame. They imagine private planes and luxury homes. They imagine limitless opportunity. But freedom is not always about resources. Sometimes freedom is simply the ability to exist without observation, to make mistakes without headlines, to grow without judgment, to be yourself without explanation. For someone living under constant public attention, those freedoms can become difficult to find. And yet, despite all of this, the remarkable thing is how many artists continue creating. How many performers continue stepping onto stages. How many musicians continue sharing pieces of themselves through their work. Because creativity often becomes a bridge between inner feelings and outer expression, a bridge between loneliness and connection, a bridge between one human experience and millions of others. That may be one reason why certain songs feel timeless. Because they speak to emotions that never disappear. Hope, fear, love, loss, longing, belonging. These emotions connect every generation, every culture,